The 22nd of August, come to Duncanely Community Centre from 12 till 6 o'clock, where we will have our exhibition and also the amazing film that Coco Visuals took of us. I am Jessica Patterson. I'm a socially engaged artist living in Killybegs at the moment. My background has always been art. From a young child, I've been involved in art and then went into performing arts. Through that, I started with visual art and then into photography. Worked for a few years as a photojournalist. And then I started to sort of get more into the socially engaged art in the way of, as a photojournalist, you often tell stories about people. And I realised that, in our world, there's a lot of stories being told by other people about people. And I felt that with the work with art and being creative, you can get people to actually tell their own stories. And represent that and bring people together and connect people. So that's how I got into socially engaged art, is just to kind of figure out how we can do that with photography, with collage work, with storytelling. So I guess that's the definition of a socially engaged artist, and I've been doing that now for quite a few years here in Donegal. I work with many different groups, and yeah, I suppose that's me. It's basically, so all the experience that you have with art, you kind of use that to work with communities and work on different social or global justice issues. Ultimately, it's about storytelling. It's about bringing things out of people and bringing people together. So that's really the social engagement within the arts, I think. So you're not working as an artist by yourself, but you're actually making art with community and using that for expression and also to highlight maybe some issues or highlight things that people want to highlight. It's all very much to do with people having their own choices, having their own spaces, being included. That's really what it's about, or that's anyway how I want to represent the work, Before I went into the socially engaged work, I worked as a photographer myself, and I also worked for different media and newspapers and whatsoever as a photo editor. So it's where I saw, other people's images being used in different ways. So I think way to use photography in social engagement is to really give people self-expression within their photos, deciding what they want to be shown, what they don't want to be shown, how they want it to be shown, and also sort of really go into that whole aspect of seeing who decides what goes out into the world, And I think we are surrounded by photos all of the time. So I think it's something that we should be aware of, who's behind all these photos that we see, and who gets to show the photos and who gets to take the photos. So I think that's an important part. And I like to work with that a lot within my work. I think, when I first discovered that this kind of work was possible, I always, as I said, I started as a photographer and I started within, as a picture editor. So I was starting to do more projects in a sense of how can you get people involved. And I did a big project actually in Belfast. And whenever I was doing portraits of people, I was a portrait artist, a photographer. I always kind of felt, well, in a way, it's also my view on that person. So I'm not, that person isn't photographing themselves. And I was always thinking, how can I get more of their story in the picture? How can I get that? So what I did at the time was I also did an exhibition, and then we had the portraits. So then I did interviews. So these interviews would be heard over headphones. So it's kind of like I started to just involve more and more community within the work that I was doing. And I thought, but that, how can we do this further? And so I started to just work more in depth with communities and seeing actually what is community voice, what needs to be heard, how can people come together and listen to each other and find out about each other. And that's what really drew me to it, just being able to find a way that people can have their own voices heard and their own voices expressed, while also having fun and coming together and, in an environment that feels nice. So it's really wanted to be able to create those environments for people, not for people, but with people, I suppose, I think we live in a world that's very divided. You know, I feel there's so many voices that are putting people against each other, you know, especially online or you know, within the media. And I feel it's really important to create spaces and have spaces to actually bring people together. Because, you know, all of this chatter over there that people that, you know, is being thrown at us every day, you know, that's not us, that's not all of us people, it's dividing us. And I feel that is really something that I feel really passionate about, you know, to just remember who we are and remember that we are together and that we are community and we love listening to each other's stories that was a few years ago. And again, I'd only moved to Killybegs, so I haven't lived there that long myself. And again, I was hearing, you know, voices come through and news coming through and divisive things, and I was like, oh, you know, I wonder, what does it mean? How do people have belonging in this place, you know, from all corners of South Donegal I was kind of concentrating on, because that's where the area I was in. I got funding for a research and development fund from Create Ireland, which is also part of the Arts Council. And I was able to use 6 months to kind of really work with the community and see what is needed, what do people enjoy, what they don't. And I partnered up with the Duncan Neely Ltd, and we started at the community hall. And at the first day I didn't know anyone that would turn up, and then actually there was about 6 people who turned up and who are still sort of part of the journey now. And we did different art methods. We used photography, collaging, everyone brought food in together. And that's how we realized, you know, how things could grow, you know, into a bigger project and maybe inviting more people into it. And one of the things that really emerged was that a lot of the people who were coming had to be driven because they didn't have a car themselves. Some of them were coming from Donegal town. So it was kind of important that we thought, you know, actually we need transport, because whenever you create a space, you know, you want everyone to be inclusive and you want everyone, you know, you want equity to be within the space. So you need to create things that make that possible, you know. So the bus was actually a big thing about it, because then that way every person was able to be picked up on the way, and no one had to feel, oh, I need to do this, or, you know. And the other one was that lots of the people that had joined us wanted to share food, and I think that was something that we also felt was really something that can bring us together. So food had to be involved, you know. Then obviously photography we already started, so we thought, well, how can we do that? And things just evolved from that. I also partnered with Giselle and Dumba. She is currently living in London, but me and her met at a residency a few years ago, and her work is amazing actually. You should look it up, Aaron and I. So her point of view was really important within this project as well. So we kind of just worked on it together with the community to develop it. And then basically what happened was that we arranged 4 bus journeys that would bring us around South Donegal. And as I said, pick everyone up on the way, and, you know, from people who might have lived in the area a long time to people who are maybe not newer to the area. And it's really just about connecting and also discovering or rediscovering our local landscapes together, you know, with new eyes and more eyes. And we went to 4 spaces: Muckross, Silverstrand, St. John's and Macharar Beach. And it was amazing. So every time we picked each other up, then we did some oral histories on the way to kind of really connect in that way. Everyone had one of those disposable cameras, film cameras. I thought it would be important to use disposable film cameras rather than the phone, because then you don't know what the picture you're taken at, and it's kind of a surprise. And all the pictures then have a similar feel, so it kind of goes through the whole project in the same way. People also had some prompts, so afterwards people would take photos of their own environment, so we could kind of share that with each other. But we drove to all these areas, and then we would always have lunch together. And that was another huge thing, because it means that everyone's bringing something to the table, in a sense, that we can share. So everyone brought amazing food, cakes, and oh my goodness, it was amazing. Again, I think it's about self-expression, you know. I didn't give anyone any technical tips or say like, oh, you must take your photo like this, or you must do it like this, or whatever. I literally just gave everyone these cameras, And then we had each week a couple of prompts for the pictures for taking it home. But again, like some people really went for it and did all the prompts, and some people didn't. They did what they wanted. So I think for me, the importance is that everyone can express themselves the way they want to, you know, and they are able to show what they want to or not show what they want to, and find things in the landscape maybe that they thought was interesting and the other person might find something else interesting, you know. So I think choice is something that we aren't given that often anymore, and I think that's a really important part with art and photography in general, you know, that you just go for it. You know, I think the actual journeys in the bus I loved, because everyone was sitting together and everyone was, you know, chatting and laughing, and I really loved seeing that. I loved people just, you know, connecting and having fun together. And, you know, also what really moved me is some people might have been quite shy at the beginning, and I loved it whenever I could see that they were just, you know, felt comfortable to be able to just talk and express themselves and say things. So that's something I love and loved. Every person had just something else to teach me, you know, in a way, I suppose. Sometimes you go into spaces, and I think a lot of people do that, where you sort of have preconceived ideas. But I think I just always remind myself not to have those, and always kind of, you know, learn from each person and what they're opening up about or what they're telling me, or, you know. I think, especially in Donegal, you know, there's a lot, especially in rural Donegal, I suppose, as well, there's a lot of aging communities, and then there's a lot of newer communities. And I think, you know, sometimes because people do live quite far apart, and maybe you know, but public transport is not amazing in our part here in Donegal. So I think it's important to have things that connect people, you know, to have actually projects that maybe don't just focus on one place where only, you know, the same people can come all the time, to actually try and include as many people as possible, you know, and actually make the effort to go into the landscapes and that way connect people, you know, because I don't often think that people don't come or do something because they don't want to or they can't be bothered. I think often it's just also convenience, you know, if it's too hard to find transport or if it's too long, you know, that kind of thing. I think to try and make it as easy as possible for people to connect, you know, and to have those spaces, I think it's important, yeah. The 22nd of August, come to Duncaneely Community Centre from 12 till 6 o'clock, where we will have our exhibition and also the amazing film that Coco Visuals took of us. And there will be a bus picking people up at 1:30 from Donegal town and then bring you back to Donegal town. So if you want to be able to come along, and we'll also have food. We're going to invite everyone for a picnic, so be there.